So today we're going to answer the question of, is there any kind of swim qualification for warrant officer candidate school? Check this out. So this is in response to, well, first of all, how's it going, all my YouTubers out there, my followers? Thank you for following me. Thank you for subscribing. I try to put out as much content as I can and try not to let it be lengthy and wordy like I'm doing now. But without further ado, let's get into it. So, one of my subscribers actually messaged me and asked me, is there a swim qualification in warrant officer candidate school? Or to become a warrant officer, I'll say it like that, in the Army. And the answer is no. Because there isn't a swim qualification in the Army in general. And I mean that as far as going through basic training, there isn't a swim qualification that you have to pass. That's part of your requirements to pass basic training. So myself, I had to do a little bit of research on the Army side. I am an Army warrant officer, but I come from originally in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps, yes, there is a swim qualification that you do have to pass. Some people try to say you don't, but yes, you do. Same thing with Navy, same thing with Coast Guard, because all three of those revolve around maritime, around water. So when it comes to the Marines actually are part of the Department of the Navy. So, without further ado on that, or as I digress. So, no, there isn't a requirement. However, do not get it twisted that the Army does not have its own maritime, its own vessels, and that it doesn't revolve around water. Yes, it does. As a matter of fact, on the warrant officer side, we have a strong lineage or history that spawns from being mine planners, pretty much running the boats and planning mines and so forth. So warrant officers were pretty much the number one, say, soldiers out there to do that. That's where the Warrant Officer Corps comes from. Army does revolve around maritime. So people don't realize that. I don't want to say the Army has one of the biggest navies or more boats than the Navy. At one time it actually did. Not anymore, but the Army does have boats, do have boat crews and revolve around water. Does work in water environments. But also, there is an MOS for divers. So the Army does have divers. A lot of people don't realize that, because when you think of Army, you think of ground pounders, you think of tanks, infantrymen. You barely think about helicopters, but now you know that warrant officers make up 70% of the pilots in the Army. Cool fact for you. So the Army does revolve around water, and it does have Army divers. Now, when it comes to the Army divers, their main mission is underwater reconnaissance, salvage, and underwater reconnaissance and salvage. Myself, actually, when I was going through Warrant Officer Candidate course, I actually had one of the candidates was an Army dive instructor, switching over to become a warrant, and he's going pilot. And speaking to him, which was very interesting to me because I never knew the Army had divers. And he said he's taught everyone from, or I'll leave out who he didn't teach. He didn't teach anyone from the Navy, of course, the Marines, same thing, or the Coast Guard. And Special Forces and Rangers. They go to a special combat diving course. Other than that, he's taught everyone else. You might come from, let's say, the Air Force that might need a diver. Don't know if they do. He's taught everyone else. He said one other thing too is that the course doesn't revolve around, it's not a combat diving course. That's the big thing. So when people do know about Army divers, or when you think about Special Forces, I say even SEALs, You think about these special operators, and you see them underwater in the movies, and they're getting into fights, and they're ripping off the mask, and they have a knife in their mouth. Well, your basic Army divers don't do that. Same thing when you have your basic Navy divers. Those guys do the same thing. They do reconnaissance, they do salvage, but those are your basic ones. Those aren't your combat divers. So mainly people who have specialties that need to have that combat skill go to a combat diving school. Now, are there warrant officers as dive instructors? Not that I know of, and I actually tried to do a little bit of research on it, and I couldn't come up with any warrants that are dive instructors. But the divers do fall under engineers, which there are warrant officers that are in the engineering realm. When it comes to the divers, the enlisted side really encompasses the whole dive portion. And I believe that's the 12 Delta series. Now, the 120, is it 12 Delta? Yeah, is the warrant officer engineering. The 12 Delta is the diver, but it falls under the engineering side. And it makes sense because the divers will do underwater welding, or when you start thinking of more high-speed things, think about sappers. If you know anything about sappers, there's a big rivalry between which school is the hardest, Ranger School or Sapper School. Sapper School is shorter, Ranger School is longer, but both of them are very vigorous and strenuous. But sappers are part of the engineering side also. So that's where I would see that and understand that why the divers fall under engineers. So not to make this very long-winded.
Blah, blah, blah.
No, you do not have to qualify for any swimming to become a warrant officer unless you're in a specialty. If you go, I won't say if you go special forces, because you're enlisted and you switch over to become a warrant, you just can't switch over to special forces. You have to go through the special forces pipeline by itself. And they train their own warrant officers, just like they train their own NCOs. You don't go through an NCO academy like everyone else. Rangers even go through your basic NCO schools. But special forces have their own NCO academy. They have their own warrant officer academy once you become a warrant. But as I digress, the answer is no. So I hope this was some information for you guys. I threw in a little bit of extra hip pocket information, about diving and about the Navy having boats. I'm sorry, about the Army having boats. Got a little excited on this one. And tune in next time. If you have any questions, throw them at me in the chat. So I'm gonna try to answer them the best I can. And help me out a little bit. Subscribe. Or hit the like button, 1 to 2. And throw some questions at me. I want a little bit of a challenge. I mean, nothing crazy, of course, but till the next time.